They need your fear. A frightening discovery shocked the entire village of Dunwich, Massachusetts. A mass grave filled with human bones was found in the local landfill. It was difficult to determine the cause of the victims' deaths, but a chemical analysis of the bones revealed the presence of some kind of unknown substance. The nasty November wind pummeled me relentlessly. I was going home, having left work earlier than usual. I had been plagued by an unbearable pain in my tooth for the past week. I turned the corner, and someone bumped straight into me. I heard a splash. My bag had slipped out of my hand and fell in a puddle. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I'm such a klutz." The woman apologized, leaning down to help me. "Today is the worst," I muttered, and immediately felt a sharp pain in my jaw. I gingerly touched the area and groaned in pain. "Are you okay?" The woman looked at me in alarm, holding out my bag. "My tooth hurts," I said with an effort. "You just got lucky," she exclaimed. "I work in this building. I have my own dental practice here. Allow me to make up for ruining your bag. My name is Miss Brooks." Before I could even think of a response, she grabbed my arm and pulled me through the door. She led me down a corridor. Continuing to apologize, we soon reached a clean reception area. She sat me down on the sofa. "Just wait here for a bit. I have to finish up with another patient. Don't worry, I'll soon relieve you of your pain." Her smile was so warm and calming that I immediately felt at ease. Settling down, I started flipping through one of the magazines displayed on the coffee table. After a few minutes, I heard that familiar, terrible sound. I remembered why I had put off going to the dentist for so long. A loud scream came from inside the office. Suddenly, the door flew open. A man came out and looked at me with a wild and terrified look in his eyes, his face grimacing in horror. Paying no attention to his surroundings, he stumbled for the exit. I looked at Miss Brooks in shock. You know, when I was young, I had also been afraid of visiting the dentist. That changed once I became a dentist myself. She pulled off her surgical mask, revealing a wide, white-toothed smile. "Don't worry, that man was just too sensitive. Come in, it's your turn." Gathering my courage, I followed her into the office and sat down on the dental chair. Miss Brooks efficiently laid out an array of dental tools on a metal tray, humming a familiar tune to herself. "Mr. Ooh, dear, I haven't even asked your name," the woman said with embarrassment, holding up a syringe. "I'm Evan Hope." "Well, Mr. Hope, I'm just going to give you a little injection and you won't feel any pain whatsoever. I promise." I opened my mouth wide and stilled in anticipation. The woman's face hovered over me, blocking out the light of the lamp behind her. Only her green eyes visible over the white medicinal mask. I felt the light but perceptible prick of a needle, and immediately felt my face go numb. My lips and tongue turned to lead. "I hope I don't feel anything," I thought, and wanted to say, but I couldn't make a sound. "What's happening?" I tried to stand, but my body wouldn't listen to me. In the meantime, Miss Brooks had already switched on one of the electrical instruments, and I heard the unpleasant humming as the blades whirred. Her face hung over mine again, and I froze in horror. Her eyes changed in front of me. Her pleasant, cheerful, emerald green eyes transformed into pure black, inhuman pools of darkness. I wanted to run away, but I was completely immobilized. I heard someone enter the office. I noticed some movement from the corner of my eye. A tall, dark figure suddenly came into view, standing side by side all around me. My eyelids suddenly felt heavy, and I closed my eyes. At that moment, I felt a terrible pain, as if my skull was being drilled into. I lay immobilized on the dental chair, screaming and crying with every fiber of my being, but unable to make a sound. I could feel everything. I felt as if I lay there for an eternity. I waited to black out, to be freed from the pain, but I remained conscious the entire time. I didn't even notice when it stopped. I lost all awareness of time. All I remembered were the dentist's words. "Relax. You have to wait for the anesthesia to wear off." I lay there, and prayed for it all to end soon. I felt an aching pain throughout my entire body. My head was splitting. The anesthesia gradually wore off and I opened my eyes. The lamp was still shining brightly at me and the room was empty. Miss Brooks appeared in front of me. I wanted to tell her that I had felt everything, but then she took off her mask and terror gripped me again. Her face, there was nothing left of it. Her terrible mouth was twisted in an unpleasant smile, revealing abnormally sharp teeth. Her black eyes dug into me with predatory hunger. I jerked away from her and fell on the floor. I immediately staggered onto my leaden feet and rushed out of the room. I could hear her shouting something from behind me. Something about medicine, but that didn't matter. I ran as far away as I could from her and that place, my head still pounding and spinning. I don't remember the rest. The same throbbing pain suddenly woke me from my sleep. I looked around. Where am I? I calmed down a little and realized that I was lying on the sofa in my apartment. I remembered the horror that I had experienced and panic swept through me. I got up. My head started spinning and I closed my eyes. Another second and I was standing next to my opened window. What happened? How did I get back here? I looked out the window, breathing in the cold air. It was already dark. What time was it? Suddenly, my attention was drawn to a group of people. They were standing under my window, watching me. A chill ran down my spine. What do they want? I remembered that I had seen them at the dentist's office. The tall, dark figures. Had that really happened? Or was it just the anesthesia? I felt more afraid than I had ever felt before. My thoughts were interrupted by a knock at my door. I went up to the door and looked through the peephole. What the hell? The same people were standing right outside my door. I recoiled in fear. What do you want? My voice shook treacherously, but all I got in response was silence. I looked through the peephole again. No one was there. I backed away in bewilderment. Suddenly, the hairs on my neck stood up. I could distinctly hear the sound of someone else's breathing. I slowly turned around and saw them. 5 tall figures wearing dark clothes were standing in my home. My knees trembled. How did they get in here? The dark figures stood in silence, their heads bowed. I froze, afraid to move. In an instant, their heads simultaneously turned to me. A wave of fear and horror overwhelmed me. Their faces wore the same terrible grin as Miss Brooks. Their black eyes rested on me greedily. It took me a moment to gather my senses. Throwing the front door open, I rushed out and ran down the stairs. I ran with what strength I had left, my head spinning. I closed my eyes and suddenly felt a sharp pain in my leg. I was lying on the street, the black bumper of a car just inches away from me. What the hell? I yelled, looking up in bewilderment. The driver leaned out of the car window and yelled something back. Suddenly, I broke into a cold sweat. He had black, empty eyes and a large mouth twisted in a predatory grin. I glanced around in a panic. A crowd had gathered near us. They all looked at me with their terrible, black eyes. Losing my mind from fear, I screamed and rushed away. I ran, looking down at my feet the entire time to avoid seeing the horrible faces of the people around me. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Turning into a dark alleyway, I stopped. I looked at my phone. The call was from an unknown number. I warily answered the call.
Mr. Hope, how do you feel?
It was Miss Brooks' familiar voice.
I was worried you left the office so quickly. How is your tooth?
I leaned against the wall, exhausted, trying to gather my thought. What should I say? I felt like I was going crazy.
Mr. Hope?
The voice on the phone continued.
Please, come to the clinic. I'm afraid there may have been something wrong with the medicine I gave you.
I ended the call. I straightened up, tiredly rubbing my eyes, my head still throbbing. I had to do something about that. I carefully looked around the corner. There weren't many people on the street. I left my temporary hideout and headed for the clinic. My head started spinning again. I stopped and closed my eyes, rubbing my temples for a few seconds. When I opened my eyes, I was dumbfounded. What's happening? I was standing in the waiting room at the clinic, the place where, not long ago, I had been desperate to run away from. Miss Brooks was standing in front of me. My face must have shown all my emotions, because she smiled at me sympathetically. Her eyes and mouth were normal again. She was cheerful and pleasant like before. I told her about everything that I had seen. Miss Brooks asked me into her office. She seemed just as afraid as I was. Mr. Hope, I'm very sorry. I didn't just ruin your bag. I also injected you with the wrong anesthesia. She looked quite alarmed. Miss Brooks sat me down in the dental chair and started checking my vision, moving her fingers in front of my eyes. I carefully followed her fingers with my gaze when suddenly I felt the prick of a needle. What the hell? My body immediately became numb. A chill ran down my spine and goosebumps appeared on my skin. Be a good boy and don't move. In an instant, Miss Brooks' voice had become cold and detached. I was paralyzed again. Everything suddenly became clear. I wasn't going crazy after all. Her injections were making me live through this nightmare. How did I end up in her clutches again? Miss Brooks was smiling with that terrible grin. The office door opened and I heard footsteps approach me. They appeared over me from the shadows. Those same dark figures that I had seen in my house. They greedily devoured me with their black, empty eyes. I didn't know whether this was a hallucination or reality. I lay there, overwhelmed with fear and hopelessness. Miss Brooks' hideous mouth opened, and she spoke to the dark figures. He will be tastier now that he's been marinating in fear. Dig in, boys. I felt like vomiting. Fear gripped me and I screamed, but it was pointless. Not a single sound came out of my mouth. My eyes began to close. The last thing that I felt was a sharp and burning pain. Something had bit into my flesh, but there was already nothing I could do.